On one of our other main stories we're following this morning, the sentencing of the Australian terrorist who killed 51 people in the Christchurch mosque attacks. New Zealand's Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters is one of the people who wants Brenton Tarrant returned to Australia to serve out his life sentence. And Winston Peters joins us now. Mr Peters, good morning.
Good morning.
Have you made approaches to the Prime Minister here, Scott Morrison, to formally request this?
No, I haven't. Look, this was a matter coming up before our courts for sentence, and until the judge gave his verdict, it was inappropriate for anybody to make any comment prior to that. This is always a view I held from the word go, depending on how the trial would end up, and I still think it's the right and fair thing to do.
Why do you think it's both right and fair that the terrorist is transferred here to Australia?
Well, he came from Australia, and the cost to New Zealand is massive. An act of mass terrorism of 51 people being murdered, 40 attempted murders, and it would have been worse than that. Then there's all the ancillary associated necessary costs to look after those families, sometimes for the rest of their lives. This is huge, and to suggest we should have a cost structure going forward for a 29-year-old who could live another 50 years or longer, in real terms, potentially $50 million or more, is surely unreasonable.
There's a bit of a sticking point in your plan. The Attorney-General, Christian Porter, here points out to us this morning that New Zealand isn't a signatory to the International Transfer of Prisoners Act, and therefore, even if you wanted this man to be transferred to Australia, you couldn't.
Well, these are just sort of temporary complications. We could fix this up by acts of Parliament, by making legislative changes, and by agreement with Australia.
Would you therefore look at New Zealand signing up to be a so-called transfer country under this act?
Well, look, we don't have to just do that to do this. In between our two countries, long-standing ANZUS partners for hundreds of years plus, this is not a complication in the way that some politicians are putting it up. All I'm saying is this is unprecedented, and the cost is huge. And at that level of security inside our prisons, surely that would be the right thing for the Australian people to accept.
Okay, and if that fails, and if you end up having to house this guy for however long, we're talking about decades here, he's obviously going to be public enemy number one, even inside New Zealand jails. So what sort of arrangements would you have to make for him?
Well, the arrangements are massive already to ensure that, in terms of our obligations under our penal system, that someone, despite them being in prison for punishment or rehabilitation, nevertheless is safe, is going to accelerate and inflate the cost massively. So the cost in our country might be $105,000 for certain prisoners per annum. This would be much, much, much higher than that. And as I say, in real terms, looking forward, down the track 50 years, possibly way more than $50 million. And given all the other costs, this is a part and parcel of the reasonable, logical process we should be discussing with Australia.
Now, I'm sure he's watching us live now, but do you intend to pick up the phone today to the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, to formally make this request?
It's not my responsibility to do that. I mean, I'm just giving the view of a party that I lead called New Zealand First.
You're the Deputy Prime Minister. I mean, your words do carry weight.
Yes, but I didn't put it out under my Deputy Prime Minister's role. I put it out as the leader of a political party that believes the fair, logical and reasonable thing to do in all the circumstances. And given the fact that the Australians have sent so many people back to our country when they have said that this person has caused an offence or a crime in Australia, even though some of them arrived when they were 4, 5 or 6 years of age, it seems to me from the point of view of fairness, balance and the straight-out reasonableness that this would be the right thing to do. And when it is said, by way of counter-argument, hang on a minute, these people come back to New Zealand or sent back to New Zealand after they've spent their time in prison. My response to that is, yes, but your man is coming back in a body bag. How can that be in any way a reasonable comparison?
It's been a particularly challenging week, of course, during the sentencing hearing for New Zealand's Islamic community. We've heard from family members of those killed. How is that community holding up, Winston Peters?
Well, remarkably well in all the circumstances. If one follows what has been said in the broadcasts and at the court over the 4 days, astonishingly well. It's a different environment. the truth is that they, in the main, have forgiven this guy, despite what he has done, and want to get on with their lives. They want closure. And in the big picture, I think many of them also believe that it'd be better if he went back to his country of origin, and therefore we could expunge him from our memory.